as it's moving towards the planet. So it's like the entire time that they're showing you, like, oh, they're headed to whatever planet. And then they show you, and it looks like the ship is going in reverse. Oh.
Considered by many to be one of the greatest English writers of all time, if not the best or at least best-selling. He stands as the quintessentially stodgy British professor archetype, dressed head to toe in tweed, carrying a cane and smoking a pipe. And he was the stereotypical Englishman by most accounts, as both his parents were native English. To some, it is a surprise Tolkien did not so much set foot on English soil until as a young boy. Rather, he was born in the Orange Free State, an independent Dutch state in what is now South Africa. His family decided to return to Great Britain when he was 3, himself with his mother and younger brother first, and his father to follow later. Unfortunately, his father did not survive to realize this move, and died from rheumatic fever before his planned departure. In England, he lived with his mother until the age of 12, when she too passed, orphaning the young John Ronald and his brother.
Somewhere who is so courageous enough to talk about something that people don't want to talk about. You know, some communities, if you talk about witchcraft, then they can even kill you. So that surprised me and elicited interest, and I shared in many WhatsApp groups.
In attendance as well was Dr. Wangari, who is a perfect embodiment of the coexistence between African spirituality and modern science.
My name is Wangari. I am an African feminist. I am a healer. I am a clinical psychologist. I am an Afrofuturist. I'm also an Afro-optimist. I first encountered Africanism gradually from stories, especially from my grandmother. A lot of her stories were centered around what we need to do if we are sick. And she was talking about plants, and she was talking about parts of animals that she would slaughter and give, you know. And she would talk about these things just in passing. I never thought much about those things. Growing up mostly in Nairobi and only visiting my grandparents from time to time for a couple of days and then going back to Nairobi. Then towards my young adulthood years, I got engrossed in some works in the library, just naturally gravitating to some Pan-Africanist works, being very, very fascinated by the works of Koge Wabiong, or one of the most renowned Africanists still alive and strong. And then honestly got this invitation to Prof. Mailu's lecture, and I thought this was very interesting because there's a lot of knowledge that's subjugated, it seems to be forgotten, and I am all about getting that which is more peripheral to be more central. That's what I do.
So science, what we call science, has two sides. That is The physical one, the one we know, which falls under under physics or empiricism, and the other one which falls under metaphysics. What we don't know, how that happens, how that works, and but now the real science, as we say, to take science without the metaphysics, only link yourself to one, you have lost a lot. Now, what happens? Communities like Africans and the others, primitive people who live in natural courses and the others, tend to develop a lot of knowledge in metaphysics. And metaphysics is that very strange thing, like this woman who actually 150 years ago saw things which are happening today, and then they happen. What is going on in her mind? What is she using to be able to see far away? Now, in African terms, dreams are very important. When you touch on that, nearly every home in Africa, all homes talk about them, because there are people who actually have definite dreams. They come true.
Revealed in the lecture was that behind most of what we shun and fear among African people is a powerful force that can be used for either good or evil.
Now, this is not the only plant. We have so many plants around here. Now, this plant here, is coming out from my mind here. This one here, it treats very many diseases, but usually it's very popular to women when they want to do some abortion. It's very dangerous. They use it for getting, through abortion. They use it for that. It's used for many purposes. So the plants we are talking about have the habit of producing very powerful properties.
Melanin is a substance that makes us who we are. It gives us our swag, our empathy, our soul, our humanity. It's all tied to this.
The lumber industry in Madagascar is low-tech. There are no machines. Elbow grease does the work. In Majunga, on the northwest coast, all the lumbermen are Zafimaneri, recognized and appreciated for their woodworking skills. These carpenters, joiners, and cabinet makers were driven from the coast nearly 3 centuries ago by rivals and took refuge in the island's Central Highlands. Money is scarce among the Zafimaneri. Many young men resort to seasonal immigration. Desiree and Ralai left their mountains for a season of sowing. This evening they're loading the last truck of the season. The 2 men are worn out. They can't wait to go home.
Charlie, no be easy. These African soldiers say chop medicine, no bullet go fit kill am. Nothing. 9mm AK, Kafungbe. Bring everything. Charlie, these things be real. Say, Charlie, medicine day where somebody go chop way. Bullet no go fit kill am. Hey.
That's man like Mike.
Anything you need to confirm more?
No. So why people need that for war?
Confirm it? Confirm. Confirm. That's it. Confirm.
Charlie.
Has locked himself inside his house for more than 55 years just to avoid women. He has been staying indoors since he was 16 years old and hardly goes out simply to avoid women. His name is Inzamwita. This man...
In the minds of children everywhere, the world is full of magic. Fictional wizards from Merlin to the Wizard of Oz have long amazed us. Now Harry Potter has captured the imagination of a new generation. In myths and stories, wizards are mysterious, heroic wise men who wear long cloaks, pointed hats, and have magical powers. They carry wands with which they command the natural world. They can transform themselves into animals. And they use secret spells and potions to heal or curse. But where do we get these ideas? Is the magic of those fictional wizards based on fantasy or fact? Far from being a modern invention, the idea of wizards and wizardry has its roots in beliefs dating back thousands of years. This is the story of where real wizards come from and the facts behind the spells and rituals they practiced. This is the amazing story of real magic. For the people we now call wizards, begins in the snow and woods of ancient Europe. It was a time when magical belief in the universe and surviving in the natural world. Europe was then a very, very different place, covered in thick forest.
The forest was a place of fear and fascination because it represented the unknown. This was, in a way, the realm of the other world as well. Filled, of course, with wild animals, many of them ferocious, particularly boars. There were deer, bears, badgers, wolves, all these creatures with which men communed very closely and didn't feel, I'm sure, the same distinction between animals and humans that we make. And animals are often depicted in very early literatures, of course, as speaking with humans and humans with them. The other world wasn't something which was like we think of heaven as existing on a different plane altogether. The other world was somewhere different, but it could also be right next to you. And the forest, with its darkness and its shadowy spirits and so forth, was one of the most obvious locations of the other world.
Nature was all that ancient man knew. In Britain, where many of our ideas about fictional wizards come from, people's beliefs were based around the natural world and the idea that the animals inhabiting it had spirits. People also relied on animals caught in the forest for food. If some humans could transform themselves into animals to aid the hunt, could this be some of the first evidence of what we now call wizardly magic?
About 9,000 years ago in Britain, somebody took a deer skull and punched holes in it to turn it into a mask. This means that somebody was able to put it on their face and transform themselves into a deer. The business of hunting is so difficult and uncertain, and it's so essential to catch meat, that we can imagine that this was something that needed special ritual to help to make it work. We We can't know who did it or why. Maybe the person was a shaman or a magician or a wizard. Maybe it was part of hunting ritual, trying to encourage the souls of animals to come to him. Maybe by entering the psychology of a deer. Maybe it was the start of what we now call theatre, part of some fertility drama to persuade the deer to multiply. But I think the point is that it enabled a human being to appear to transform themselves into a deer.
These magical transformations weren't just happening in ancient Britain. They were taking place all over the world. The best evidence for this has come from the wilderness of Siberia, Russia, one of the few places where ancient graves have been preserved. Over the last 35 years, Sergei Arutyunov has excavated more than 300 Inuit burials, some surviving deep in the permafrost for over 2,000 years.
The excavations landed extremely rich material and shed new light on the mythology of these people some 2 millennia ago. Animals in general play an enormous part. The transformation of animals, the reincarnation of animals, the connections between the human world and animal world, and many images of animals are found in our excavations. The Eskimo believes in the unity of the human world and the animal world. It is a single world where one kind of animal can transform themselves into other kinds. So a polar bear can become a human being, and a human being can become temporarily a polar bear if he is a strong shaman.
It could be that the shaman is the very heart of our exploration of what we now think of as a wizard. And there are some shamans still practicing today. Shot during the last 20 years, this rare film documents the life of a modern Siberian shaman.
A shaman's job is to serve a community, to take hunting. It's very important to understand the psychology of animals, to be able to persuade them to give themselves to you, to be able to outwit them perhaps if they don't, to know where they are. And one way of getting this special knowledge is actually to turn into these animals, much like wizards and magicians in other traditions. And that comes through the state of trance. Shamans reach that state, most especially by drumming and other forms of rhythmical activity. But they may be other things. They may dance, they may fast or take psychotropic drugs. And all of these things are said not to distort your vision, but in fact to enhance it and to make it clearer and more real. This headdress covers her eyes, and it represents that she is seeing with a second sight into another world, into the world of ultimate reality. They believe that the cosmos has layers. They believe that the shaman is traveling from one layer to another. It's very difficult to control the shaman in that state, so the assistants have to hold on to her to prevent her from flying off into a kind of spiritual hyperspace and being unable to get back again. You could say it resembles our idea of magic, in the sense that there's a very direct connection between your intention and what you do about it. You want something to happen, and so you do a spell, you do an action, you do a ritual, you do a prayer, and you hope that that will make the desired outcome happen. You want animals to give themselves to the hunter. You go and talk to the animal spirits, then animals come to the hunter. The shaman is somebody who has this additional knowledge, which everybody else needs to draw on.
Ancient people sent their shamans to their graves with enormous ceremony and reverence. The most spectacular evidence of this burial ritual is in Dr. Rutyunov's excavation of a shaman's burial site in 1967.
From the very beginning, it was obvious that it was a very unusual burial. It was obvious that somebody or something very precious should have been hidden in this excavation that needed to be preserved so thoroughly. From the top, it was covered by huge wooden slabs.
The skeleton was crushed so badly under the weight of the slabs that the team couldn't tell whether it was male or female. As they carried on digging, they stumbled across a terrifying symbol of the shaman's power.
We suddenly saw, under it, quite clearly, somewhere between the knees of the skeleton, a mask. with a frightening grin. And our Eskimo friends, when they saw it, jumped back, shocked, and said, "Don't touch it, it's death." At that moment, Dorian Sergeyev descended into the grave and put his hands on the mask and told us, "I have taken this power on myself. Perhaps other people can also touch this mask," but they didn't touch it.
Archaeology has proven that these shamans, these ancient wizards, really did exist. It also provides evidence for the real origins of that favorite instrument of a mythical wizard's magic. The wand.
This is probably the oldest sacred site in the entire British Isles, used constantly from about 30,000 years ago to about 20,000 years ago. That's before the last ice age, and could be the site of the first human burial ever known in the British Isles. What's really unusual about the cave is the ivory wands that seem to have been made there or broken there. We're talking here about the time when human beings first become human, the very, very first time when they have ceremonial burials, they bury people properly with goods, they make art, they seem to be able to think religiously, spiritually. This person was a sorcerer, somebody so powerful, a wizard of his time, that he was put in the greatest ceremonial place of the entire landmass, and they broke the ivory wands, the sign of spiritual power, and put them in with him, and dyed the whole place blood red to give him a good rebirth in the afterlife, and left him.
What function might the wand have had in aiding a powerful wizard?
The wizard's wand is his most potent tool. Everybody knows how it feels when you eyeball somebody and you point at them. Once you, yes you, with a wand, you extend that. It's a much, much more powerful finger or arm with a mind stuck in it. It's an object which, rather like a lightsaber or a ray gun, projects the human will directly.
If the first clues to the origins of wizardry are found with the ancient shamans, the next evidence comes with the real-life inspiration for that most well-known of mythical wizards, Merlin. One of the very first fictional wizards is Merlin. He's most popularly known as King Arthur's spiritual advisor. But as more and more scholars have come to examine the myth of Merlin, other views have emerged.
Merlin's story is a transformation from being a military nutter to being an all-purpose wizard. He's originally a warrior who goes mad because he abandons his laws and leaves them to die, and then goes mad with guilt, wanders in a forest, gradually gets his sanity back with a gift of prophecy. And after a few hundred years, you reach the 12th century, and he's turned into somebody who's the son of a mortal mother and a demon father, so he has demonic powers in him to work with spirits and to achieve magic. He's actually bigger and stronger physically than most men. And we roll on another couple of hundred years, and he's become the ultimate wizard, the person with the great books of spells who understands how the world works, who knows how the future's going to be.
For one man, tracking down the truth behind the wizard Merlin has been a life's quest.
I believe there's very strong arguments to support the idea that there was a real Merlin, that he lived up in the north, near Carlisle, on the banks of the Solway, which was a very wild region indeed in those days. It's my belief that Merlin was almost certainly a druid.
Around 2,500 years ago, the Druids began to adopt the shamanic beliefs prevalent in Europe and turned them into an organized religion complete with set rituals, high priests, and mass following. The Merlin of myth seems to have inherited all of these traditions.
The early legend describes him as acting in an extraordinarily shamanistic way. He is accompanied by his familiar animals, a wolf and a boar. He lives out in the wilds and the forest. He even appears to fly. He runs with a deer. There's one very, very peculiar reference which suggests that he himself may have worn an antlered helm.
Legend aside, as a druid, Merlin would have been part of a sophisticated magical network that spanned Europe.
The Druids are the people who are expert in magic and religion in northwestern Europe about 2,000 years ago. And they were very big in what's now the British Isles, France, and the Netherlands. They impressed the heck out of the Greeks and Romans as people of great power and wisdom. Unfortunately, they impressed the heck out of them in different ways. Some Greek and Roman writers said they were incredibly wise and gentle, deeply in touch with nature and the human soul. And others said they were bloodthirsty barbarians, dyed up to the elbows in human blood, and experts in sacrifice and all manners of savage and horrible religious rites.
I think Druids are very influential in terms of putting forward an image of the wizard, the wise man, the wise woman, the seer, and so on. People who understood the universe, natural scientists, and most important, they were in charge of all sacrifices, public and private, including human, and they were in charge of all religious matters. So they were very, very powerful.
The Druids had magical objects, secretive rituals, and all manner of apparently wizardly powers, including the ability to divine the future. one of the key attributes of the fictional wizard. The most conclusive evidence that the Druids practiced divination is found at a unique site, the Stanway Quarry in Essex, England.
The site of Stanway was excavated between about 1987 and 1997 intermittently, and it's so important because it's the only grave we Britain of a doctor or ritual specialist.
In the grave, archaeologists discovered coins, knives, and an unusual gaming board. They also discovered something that suggests that part of this doctor's practice was to predict the future for his patients.
These artifacts that are found in the grave have been called divination rods. These are the only examples we have in Britain. It's been suggested perhaps they were used for cauterizing wounds, but they're very unusual. We have 4 made of iron and we have 4 made of copper alloy. And amongst those, we have 2 small and 2 big of each sort.
Basically, what's happening with divination is that you are trying to foretell the future, and you're doing that by, again, tapping into the spirit world. That means that you're trying, in a sense, to ask the supernatural world when the best time or the bad time for doing certain things is.
So you could ask questions like, is my sick daughter going to die? Should I take her to the doctor? Is today a good day to perform a healing ritual? These sorts of yes-no questions.
He said there's 13 steps to becoming a Satanist, and you've done almost all of them already. All I had left to do, I had to slice my left thumb and bleed onto a document. And on the final page of a 5-page document, I agree to sell my soul to the devil. We're talking, and he says, basically in a nutshell, Satan has chosen you to be the next high wizard. And my heart skipped a beat. These guys are sought after by everyone. Actors, rock stars, kings, queens, presidents, diplomat. My first month, I was chosen almost on my 21st birthday. And it was a few days later, I found myself in Bohemian Grove.
You got molested by a teacher in school, and I think that's when, after that, that's when things really went to a different level. Can you explain why that was so important in your story?
Well, in my school, your time to go to the bathroom is the 3 minutes in between classes. PE is on the far side of the school, outside. When you come inside from that, you've got 3 minutes to make it all the way to the other side of the school, to my next class. It's a math class. So I got in there, I really had to pee really bad, so I put my hand up. Teacher calls on me and I say, can I go to the bathroom? You had 3 minutes in between classes. Why didn't you go then? 3 minutes isn't enough time for me to go to the bathroom and come here. I'd have been late. You'd have given me a detention. I have PE before this. I don't have time to make it. So she gives me the pass, and she tells me not to dilly-dally, not to play in the hall, don't play in the bathroom. Go do your job and come back. Okay. So I take that, walk down to the end of the hallway, and go to the bathroom. When I enter the bathroom, there's a noise in there. It sounds like somebody's breathing hard in the bathroom. But I look under all the stalls, there's no feet. And we have like 5 stalls. And then we have a large handicap stall. So there's nobody at the urinals. I walk to the first door, open it, nobody there. Next door, open it, nobody there. Third and fourth doors, nobody there. This is getting uber creepy. Because I can hear there's somebody in this room. But I'm not seeing anybody anywhere. I mean, I'm checking the ceiling, the corners, vents, somebody hiding. If somebody had been hiding in a vent, that would probably scared the crap out of me. Or I might have looked up and seen somebody attached to the ceiling. I've seen all those movies. That would have scared me too. But they're not in any of the stalls. And then I open up the final one. And there's a female teacher sitting on the toilet with her skirt hiked up to her waist. I can see her vagina. But I'm 11 years old. I'm not interested in sex. And women are not on my radar whatsoever. And I'm not even looking at girls in school. and I don't know what it is. To me, it looks like she has a wound. It looks like somebody cut her or something, and that there's something there. And she's playing with it, and moaning and writhing, and tells me to come in the bathroom. So I come into the stall, and she tells me to lock it behind me. So I do that. And then she sexually assaults me. Then, when you're involved in spiritual warfare, and everybody that's alive is involved in spiritual warfare, if you don't believe that the devil is any threat to you, he can attack you every day with impunity. Because you don't think it's the devil attacking you.
And he did. He did to you from pretty young. So let's go back now to what you were talking about with the movies. But first, how long was it before the first time you started hanging out with these people and the time that they introduced you and gave you the opportunity to be part of those movies?
I started hanging out with them probably right around my birthday. But that was around the first time I went. It was a couple of days after my birthday. And they showed me all the porn. Like, I'd seen every piece of porn they had in their house, probably within the first month of being there. And then they gave me these 3 girls to sleep with. Around that same time, I agreed that I wanted to be in these movies. You know, this looked like fun. And suddenly I'm interested in girls. And, you know, not only am I interested in girls, but I have the opportunity to see as many girls as I want to naked in real life. Like, I'm not just looking at it in a magazine or in a video. I'm going to be with this girl on the bed doing whatever it is we're told to do. Good morning. Get a second opinion.
That's a funny quote. But yeah, and that's why you're a Christian today, because you can't actually sell your soul. And
right, what you have done is given your will to the devil.
Okay, so now let's go back into the story that you were telling from that vantage point of when you were 12. You became a member by signing this because you had already done the other steps, and right. I think they gave you a robe at that time. So robes are something that we see in like Satanism, satanic covenants. If you see a movie on TV or whatever, there's robes. There's usually a black and a red robe. What do they mean, and what's the difference between them?
Well, you excluded one. There's a white robe.
Okay.
The white robe is the innocent person. And that's what you wear when you first come into the room. They'll have a big coven meeting where they're welcoming you in. And you come in a white robe, and they baptize you, full submersion, in a big, it looked like an upside-down demon skull. And you get baptized in that, and it's human blood, pig's blood, and human urine. They pull you up out of that, and you go into another room, and you take a shower. And when you're in there, you get changed into a black robe with a red inverted pentagram. And you come out with the cowl raised up, and it signifies you've been baptized into a world of darkness. And they read the document off that you signed the night before. They show your signature, and you also pull off the band-aid and show your thumb, so people see that it's your thumb that was sliced. So it is your blood. And then, after everything,